First on the agenda is communications and correspondence. There was one that I know I included in there, which was a really nice email complimenting our staff about our lakefront. I got so many nice compliments. Was the start of the year about the beach. So that was nice. Anyone, any other correspondences that we would like to note, not in the packet?
No other correspondence, just the same sentiment. I've heard kind of chat. People are pleased with the operation.
Great. Okay, moving on to 3.0, public comment recognition of visitors. Would anyone in our public like to address the board today? Okay. Seeing there is none, on to 4.0, old business. Seeing there is none, on to 5.0, new business, beginning with our 5.1 July 2025 financial update.
Okay, so the income statement through July has us at 2.8 in actual versus a 2.4 budget. That's a difference of 300 grand. That's the tightest it has been, I don't know, like ever. And I can't even remember the last time it was that tight. When you look at 2024, we had $12 million in actuals. So this year, the staff really did a good job doing their budget distributions and matching up when revenues were going to come in. We are behind budget in property taxes. Difference in miscellaneous revenue is a permanent difference. We have now surpassed the budget in interest income, and everything that we add to interest income at this point will be permanent. Okay. It looks like expenses are, we're still on utilities. I'm working on the projection for electricity for the district. When we're have projections now, I'll do the electricity budget projection, and then I'll figure out what that percentage should be for next year. I have a memo for the staff to work on their projections for next year. That's the only piece that's missing. I don't know what number to tell them for electricity. So I'll figure that out in the next 24 hours because I want to get that memo out quickly. The capital expenses are about $1 million behind where the budget is. I think the easiest thing for me to do to explain this is to add another column to the capital expenditures to show what the year-to-date budget is. So this way you can see by project where the budget, what months the budget were set up for the capital expenses, and you'll see where we are and why we're off $1 million.
Does anybody think that's necessary? I mean, I appreciate you offering to do it, but the capital is going to happen when it's going to happen. When I look at the numbers, that's not the one that I focus on anyway, but I don't know what other people think about it.
If it's calm, it depends on how much work. I get it. Like I'm the same way. If it's when it's invoiced. I mean, let's just try it on for size. It depends on how much work it is.
Right, I'm just trying to not make extra work for you. How much work is it?
It's just another VLOOKUP column in the spreadsheet that I'm putting
We
in.
might just get confused and say no.
I would say the only, I tend to agree with you. It's not a number that I jump to because, it's as billed. And it will just make all these numbers that much smaller by adding another column.
All right.
Let's split the baby. What if you showed us both next time and then we can make a decision?
Showed you.
You could add a column. We could say, hey, those numbers are too small. We don't need it. And we'll go back to the old way. But that way you can go through the exercise. We can see both of them together and just try. Or just send us a draft maybe.
Yeah. Believe me.
But I agree. I do agree.
It doesn't smaller.
That's right. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Like I said, if I thought there were any permanent differences that you're not catching in that one column that says budget over and budget under, that might be the most helpful. Because right now we're still collecting invoices for the projects that we're working on. And that kind of explains income. We know that electricity is just going to be way ahead of budget. It's depending on how big the increase is for the second half of the year, but I'm still working on that.
So I have a few questions. So as we look at the year-to-date variance, right, Colin? So all of the expenses were in a way overestimated for year-to-date, according to the budget relative to what has been spent. Yeah. And then we look at the year-to-date variance on the real estate taxes. So when you schedule out the real estate taxes, you just do it in 2 lump sums, right? No, you amortize it for every month.
No. I take a look and see how we got paid out last year, and I follow those same percentages in the current year.
So we receive that income twice a year.
We receive that income in larger chunks twice a year, but we do get it dribbled all through the year to us.
Okay,
Because there's another piece that runs through here, replacement taxes, and they come through like 7 out of the 12 months. So that kind of gets peppered in there also.
and the replacement taxes are when people have contested their taxes in the reduction? or what?
The replacement taxes are, they're charged on businesses.
Mhm.
And they're supposed to be a property tax as if businesses were paying property taxes, just like the people who live here pay property taxes. You don't have a lot of that here in Wilmette, meaning the Park District. It's a big, much larger number for the village. For us, I want to say it might even be $400,000.
In total for the year. Okay, so that's how you be, to be behind, or what is it, to be overestimated by $1.7 million is, you know,
Well, with,
It's just a
we're
time.
not getting,
It's a timing.
not getting the money,
Okay.
it's just timing. Yeah.
all right. So in July, because it's the end of July, so we wouldn't have received the second installment.
Well, we would not have received July yet. We did receive it in August. We got some in July and August last year,
Okay,
because
this
there were
is,
people who prepaid.
this is to the end of July for this year.
I know, so
Yeah, right.
last year.
Let's just let each other finish sentences, please, folks.
Thank you.
You and you, both of you.
So last year, we received some in July and in August,
Right.
even though the bills went out in August. Right? So that was what I followed for this year.
Right.
Like I'm constantly chasing with these guys. You know, it just comes in when it comes in.
Right. Right. I just am trying to figure out how, you know, the variance is so great in budget relative to actual. And it started, what triggered me on it was the difference in all the expenses, right? And then I jumped up to, well, or then I came down to the bottom and I said, well, how come the difference is so little? And then I saw the taxes. And so I just had to ask how, you're looking at it, because I know we've spent a lot of time talking about applying revenue when it's used, even though it may have been paid in advance, you know, for, as we keep using the paddles, we have the approvals. So I just want to make sure that in my mind, I'm following that we're doing a similar thing with real estate taxes, because that's such it's a good part of our income that is projected, because we can't always count on what we're getting. And so I just want to understand how you were tracking it. So thank you.
Okay, you're talking about accruals now. This is not an accrual-based statement. This is a cash-based statement. By year end, it becomes an accrual-based statement. Okay?
Right.
And you
Okay.
have just confused
So
everybody, so sorry.
I just got, yeah, so now I'm, so in October, when everybody starts paying for paddle, if that's when everybody starts paying for paddle. On this statement, when we look at it in November, we'll see all that money, so we'll be way ahead on income because of the income per paddle.
You got it.
Okay, and then as we go into next year, our monthly statements won't show that income in January and February. But we talk about the accrual basis, and that is on a different statement than you look at. So we gotta keep in mind, when we look at this, it's different than the other statement. This is cash, the other one's,
Right.
okay,
So very quick,
yeah,
we will see all that money come in October and November, and then in December, you will see the deferral adjustment. You'll see it come down, and then it becomes income in January of next year.
but not in this statement, not in our, in the
So
December.
basically make an adjustment, apportioning it properly. So effectively, some of that money will go back out in this year's statement and be added to next year's.
But not in our month ending statement. It'll be in
The year
the other
end.
one.
For December.
for December.
We'll see it come out when we're reviewing it in January,
Yes,
in the December statement.
yes.
Okay.
I'm going to ask an obvious question just because I am admittedly not the finance person on our board. I would like to better understand why we spend the amount of time we do talking about things that we don't have control over. And in that property taxes, for example, how things are measured, it seems to me that we spend a lot of time. So I imagine there's significance to why we spend a lot of time talking about it. So can you touch upon the intention of the conversation? We can't control that part, right? So why do we spend so much time talking about it?
While you
No.
think about that, could I jump in and just sort of pick up on it for a second? So at least in my mind, one of the reasons we talk about it is because we're trying to figure out where we're going to end up at the end of the year. So yes, you take a look at the property taxes, we collected 4.052. We expected we'd get 5.8. At the end of the year, it's all going to work out, to your
Right.
point, and I agree with that. But as I look at this, so we're just about $500,000 behind on operating surplus. So is that something I should be concerned about? Well, actually, no, there's a really good story here because we're 1.75 ahead on taxes, which we know are going to be coming in at the end. So I sort of go to the next level then and take a look at, so if we're 500 grand behind, but we're 1.75 ahead on taxes, that means even though it looks like we're $500,000 behind, we're actually 1.25 ahead. So where is all that coming from? And are we going to see that at the end of the year, or is it going to even out? So the other two numbers, this was the question I was going to then ask you on this, is obviously, if you would assume that taxes were according to the plan, we're 1.25 ahead. Well, we know that about 525 of that has to do with the interest, with you say is pretty much locked in at this point. And then we've been talking about utilities for a while. That's another two, whatever. So that explains about 800,000 of the 125. So my follow-up question with all this is the other 450, do we think that's going to go straight to the bottom line at the end of the year, or does it work its way out through the rest of the year? And that's in my mind why we talk about this stuff that we don't have much control over.
The question, because what I think to hit on what Commissioner Duffy was speaking to, we all have varied ways in which we like to receive the information clearly. You can look at the numbers, easily make a story out of it. I make a story more with a narrative. And I know in many cases you update us with a narrative. I find it really helpful anytime, especially we have a FinCal, to have the narrative piece of it. And so as far as how we review it, that would be something I would love to see incorporated. If there is a big story to tell on the numbers in this report, a narrative would be very helpful for me in the report.
Yeah, I'll just add, now that we've reestablished the FinCal, this is an opportunity to evaluate, is it meaningful to have this conversation here?
That's a great question.
Be in FinCal?
Or do we do it next month?
Yes.
Good question.
Yeah,
Yes.
it does allow a little more time for the receivables to bear out. We always have the taxes issue, at least I've not seen the taxes issue in 6 years. I want to just acknowledge we are within 5.4% of total revenue and within 4.8% of operating expenses. I think that's pretty exceptional. 5%, I'm pleased with that. I think I think we're on track. I don't see anything that is giving me pause. I know we'd like to understand the utility savings that we're seeing. So would I, but I don't know that there's much more to discuss here. I'd love to get to capital. That's the one I'm excited about.
So if I could just comment about moving this to the FinCal,
Sure.
we are really pressed for time in FinCal.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I agree. I don't like having it right before the board meeting because we end up going to 56 minutes.
Yeah.
And we should have a different time, as I stated last week. I don't love rushing. And I think we often get to minute 56 and have a lot of meaningful conversations. So I'm interested in either moving it to a new Monday or we start earlier. And we can identify what that looks like. But we have not scheduled all the FinCals throughout the fall. So I think there's an opportunity to give ample time so everyone can talk through what is needed.
All right. With that being said, let's move to 5.2, the reserve policy discussion.
Julie, did you want to talk about capital?
Yeah, is there anything anyone wants to highlight? Anything you'd like us to know?
Yeah.
On capital?
We're just, we did talk about capital real high level. I'm gonna add that I still am not sure that I know what all my takeaways are here for the next meeting, so talk about that.
I think,
later.
yeah, I mean, I'm as the one that, I think that there's and this is an evolving process. There's some belief that we probably, as you pointed out, look at this too frequently in too much detail, but we all have an interest to make sure it's right. I'm kind of in between the quarterly and monthly, which is bad, because that would be every 2 months. Yeah.
Introduce a third.
So let's think on it, right? I mean, I do agree with all the variances in terms of property taxes, like property taxes, miscellaneous income, waiting, like there are bigger stories to tell here, but as Commissioner Murdoch pointed out, you gotta look and see if we're keeping pace. So I don't think it's, there is no specific takeaway because it's a moving target. And we'll just probably keep having this conversation. It might take 6 months to get a good rhythm for it. And Chris will have a lot to say, given his experience at Oak Park, and we'll get there. Like, no urgency. I think we all know that there's nothing blowing up on this sheet of paper. So absent that, I think we're okay to move on.
Yeah, opposite, I think it looks like we're ahead.
Yeah,
Just, need to add the Q2 variance memo.
Yes.
Have gone out. There is nothing on that to indicate to me that we are going to be ahead of target or behind target with respect to all the stuff that's reported. You already know what the permanent differences are. So, does that make sense?
Mhm.
Any other comments or discussion on capital? Okay. All right, moving on to 5.2 reserve policy discussion.
Okay, so we talked about this very briefly at the FinCom Cal that we didn't have nearly enough time to dive into. That's why you're seeing it here. And so what I did was attach our current fund balance and net asset policy for you to review and maybe to confuse things a little more. But the intent is really focused on what we have here and any suggestions that the board wants to entertain and for staff to get back more info on. We're happy to do that, but just laying out that $4 million minimal fund balance that we have in our current policy that was put into place many years ago. Keeping in mind that our bond rating is really important for the future of this agency and currently being at AAA now. That was certified last year.
24.
In 24. So that's a good thing. With this current policy, we're able to recertify. Although Moody's likes to see a little higher amount in that fund balance. And that I mentioned there's a few neighbors that are at a 50% fund balance. That would be a massive number for this agency. And you're tied to that. So the more we raise that, I just want to let you know that that's the money we have to have in reserves, and that can affect our bond rating negatively if we have a tough year or two. Not that we expect to, but you never know. So just keeping that in mind. And then I did mention also what Glenview does from a high level, at least for that information I was able to gather from them was, and similar to kind of how Oak Park handles it, they have fund balances tied to each of their funds at different amounts. And then through the capital fund, some call it a master plan fund. At other agencies, Glencoe calls it a master plan fund, which is really your capital plan. And that's more detailed and laid out where you have your reserves basically in your capital plan that are tied to specific projects. Some do it 5 years, some like to see it 10. 10's kind of pushing it, doing a little bit of that. At least dollar figure amounts and some of the bigger projects. But what I liked in Glenview that they have both that capital replacement fund. They look at their assets, $5,000, it's $5,000 or $10,000 and up, and their lifespan. And they used to do it for 10 years. They moved it to a 20-year plan because a lot of your assets are 20 years. You buy a rooftop unit, put a new roof on. They put 1/20th of the money for that in that year each year. So you keep adding so that when that asset is ready, you have the money for it. You're not pulling it from something else. And then on top of that, they have what they call the capital development fund. And that fund is the fund that's in there for the new playgrounds or potentially a new facility or something you're doing that you're adding new, and that's kind of where they would have reserves specifically in those buckets. So that's some of the information I was able to gather in a couple days last week from our neighbors, just to stem some conversation about the direction this board is looking to go.
It's really helpful to hear how other districts do this, and it's interesting. I like the idea of 1/20th, for example.
Yeah,
Depending on the schedules of given item.
I'm gonna dig into that more. I'm meeting with Mike next week, so.
So, curiosity, as we're reviewed by Moody's, if we've got all these different funds, you know, a 1/20th capital fund, and we have a reserve fund, and do they look at the combination of all of those, not just what we call the reserve fund?
They'll look at a combination of what our policy, mainly they're looking at our policy and ensuring we meet, they have guidelines of minimum percentages that they like to see. I put that 15% number as kind of like a minimum guideline. If they want to see what our policy is, and are we whole, right? So are we, you know, putting the money away and consistently doing that, meeting that policy? I think that weighs heavily. And Sheila and I talked about, you know, the importance of the bond rating, and it wouldn't affect us as much on our purchasing power being a AA versus a AAA. But the scary part is when you go to a AA, it's a lot easier to fall. And when you're at a AAA rating like we are, it's a lot harder for us to drop down in our levels. Also, they look at tax base. This is a phenomenal tax base, and that plays in our favor as well. And that's a big piece.
I had a minor freak out this weekend that Chris knows. First of all, Chris had baby Sutton was born. He's not brought baby to the meeting yet. We're working on that.
It's not even 2 weeks old.
I know.
Congrats. Take your time.
Yeah.
We don't need to produce evidence of the baby.
No.
We
So
Photos.
we have photos. We have proof of life. So I had a minor freak out this weekend. I thought I'd share. I read this as page 1. It says, and I just thank you to Cecilia for talking me off the cliff. Page 1 says $4 million. Page 2 in the general fund says no less than 2 months operating expense.
Should be.
Should be, right? This is the scenario. So in terms of the question about this policy, it needs to be cleaned up, because if you, under that standard, the operating expense standard, we are missing the reserve policy, because we're at 26 million operating expenses. We would need 4.2, and then we would need by inflation going forward. We do have some money in the long-term capital model to increase that 4 million number. And I would, I'm of the opinion that probably has to stay, and we need to build. So that's point 1, that I do think this needs to be revisited and updated. And we can talk about indexing inflation, and we can do that next year, like in the spring or something, but this thing kind of freaked me out. And then point 2 is I looked at the capital replacement plans that not Glenview had, I think it was Winnetka, and they had, it's the same thing. The 3 pieces you need is an expiration date, and that's not just that coincides with the project. It's so you don't have this money going around, and then you would update it and renew it. It needs the useful life statistic to it, and then it needs a mechanism where you put in the same percentage of money every year. So I think, again, off the top of my head, I think it was something like 5% of expenses, and don't quote me on this, that's what went into that fund. And the 1/20th would probably satisfy that, but I don't know how we would do that for like a project. It needs a standard, because it's an ordinance, right? So as we think about that, just know it's not something we could decide every year. It would be committing this board to something, say 5-10 years out, or at least that's my understanding of it. We would have to look at that.
I'm not sure I understand the third. I understand the first 2.
Mhm.
I don't understand
So the third is that
I assume it would be driven by, you know, the assets and their useful life and what you need to contribute this year to make
So
sense.
so think about Bethel or the big tree, and we're planning ahead to save some certain amount.
So you're talking about new projects, not.
That's the part of the
Not
fund,
the-
right? So there's the capital replacement fund, and then there's a long-term asset fund.
Got it.
And that long-term asset fund, because it doesn't have the 1/20th useful life, it needs some sort of mechanism to come out of discretionary capital. So it's a commitment and it's worth thinking
And I
about.
appreciate you saying that, and I haven't thought about it that much. I mean, I do like the idea of having a replacement schedule and funding it, and I think I've said here at a couple of these meetings, we used to always have a 10-year capital plan, individual for 5 years and kind of a bucket for the other. I'd love to get to this point. I know that Christie made a lot of progress with some of those longer schedules. I'm not sure, I would think that you could decouple those two pieces, though.
Yeah, they're two different
Yeah.
funds.
Yeah,
I was just making the point in the context of like thinking ahead to Bethel, right?
right. And by the way, we should talk about that. Hello, we should absolutely be setting aside a significant amount of money for that. But you were talking about how we would be bound to something. I'm not sure if we have to be that specific on both funds, if you will.
It's certainly not, again, the capital replacement fund is tied to that 120. Everything has a useful life, it's written, and it's an ordinance,
Mhm.
right? So you can't, in my understanding, again, I'm no lawyer, because it's an ordinance, it can't just be like, we're gonna put in a certain amount of money every year. It would be, and it doesn't have to be a lot, it just is like, it can be no less than this percentage of, I don't know, I kept reading operating, but I don't remember what it is. It's not something to worry about, it's just those are the characteristics that would have to go into an ordinance because it's a fund over 10 years when it expires, like, those are just the characteristics to do that. I agree, I think step one's probably this, the capital, but we also, so like, I got a little bit off track because I did some work on it where it was like, I think we need to redo the policy. I do think there's an argument to be said for not going overboard like our neighbors. I do want to know more about why they put 4 million in 2011 and didn't index it for inflation. And yeah,
I think I can answer that. I'd like to know.
I call it Gordon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gordon wasn't around in 2011.
Okay, go ahead.
So I was actually on the board when we did that policy, and really the indexing piece wasn't the focus. The notion was that we were holding too much of the taxpayers' funds. Up to that point, I think our policy had us holding 6 to 8 million, and like most of our peers, and everybody holds a lot of money, but because we have so much fee revenue, we didn't think that we needed the same kind of reserve. So I think it was mostly Graham and Brault, and I was still pretty new at that point. Did some stress tests, and we had just gone through a recession where, in theory, recession is when you need those reserves because your income is down. But we actually found that our income increased as people stopped sending their kids to North Shore Country Day and Loyola and sent their kids to our camps and whatnot. And so I think the impetus for revisiting it at that point was to reduce the reserves because it didn't appear that we needed them in the way that some other districts do because we have all of this extra fee revenue, and to do it in such a way such that the rating services wouldn't ding us, that there was a thoughtful process for why we were not holding quite as much. But in terms of the specific question about indexing, at the time, the assumption was that this policy would get revisited, every 2 to 4 years, and here we are now, 13 years later with Mike, and that's why.
Yeah,
it's
it's
talking
great.
about indexing.
You
So that's the answer.
effectively did it, right? Like
Yeah.
it was 4 million in 2011, it's 5.2 now, right?
Right.
I do think we're at that threshold because I look back at the 2011 budget and that was 4 months of expense. We're at less than 2. And my memory's not great, but felt like we were locked down for 8 weeks in 2020. And that probably should be our threshold, right?
Certainly, there's some logic to that, for sure, I agree. Yeah.
But if you recall, when we were locked down, there were no expenses.
Correct.
So to say that we only had 2 months of expenses covered in our reserves isn't really accurate.
Because that's just the math,
Yeah.
right? I'm just
I-
dividing by just.
Right, I guess in circumstances to try and say COVID was a test, well, COVID was a great test because we actually made money. We exceeded our budget, if I remember correctly. Because we had shut down and we didn't have all those expenses, we came out ahead of our goal for the year.
I would
It
note
might have been
that
21, not
20,
that was because we got the funds for the cart path.
That was.
We also furloughed all of our part-time staff and a lot of our full-time.
So for the purpose of this conversation, it sounds to me like we have two conversations occurring. One is the policy as it stands, the 10%, 15%, that $4 million number that we sort of need to discuss, and then how we divvy up the different funds and saving mechanisms. Is how I'll put it in simpler terms. Would those be the two conversations you'd like us to go down? So why don't we start with the $4 million conversation and where it is and where we would like it to be.
Well, I will also add, I mean, I think Sheila has previously talked to the board about meeting with Moody's and getting an idea of what Moody's would like to see as a reserve. I thought it came out like 15%.
Right, but
So-
the only funds that they identify as supporting that 15% are the non-limited funds. So that would be our general fund, our recreation fund, and our capital replacement fund. And it was a battle to try and get them to agree to capital replacement, but once they understood how we use that fund, they agreed. So they would be looking at if they, in order to keep the AAA rating, this is the last discussion we had in 2024, they would be looking for 15% reserve and only getting credit for that 15% out of those three funds, because the other funds are all limited to what we can do with the money that's in those.
On the other hand, you and I attended a session with S&P and Moody's is still a little bit nebulous about how they do these things, how we feel and whatnot. S&P has gone to great lengths to define what the factors go. And it's been almost 6 months or whatever, so maybe you remember better than I do. But my recollection was that they had 4 or 5 different factors in determining the rating, and reserves was only either 20 or 25% and of the weight, and they had a point system, and to go from 15% down to 8%, and I think we're 10%, it costs 1 point within that 20%. So at least what S&P is telling us is it's not as important. Now, Moody's, again, we want to have high rating from the highest rating we can from both of them. And I think everybody here is in favor of increasing our reserves. I think the question is going to be, are we trying to increase some of those reserves to specifically earmark for a potential big tree project, which I think you had suggested in the past meeting, which I think is a great idea. Or is it just more of some sort of a general? I mean, I will tell everyone here that if we go through this long process and when all is said and done, we're just increasing our reserves from 4 to 5.5, and we think we're going to go to the voters sometime in the next 3, 4, 5, 7 years, I think that's a disaster. I mean, I think that we're going to have to really set aside some serious money if we think that we're going to ask the voters for more resources at some point. So we can go at this a couple of different ways, but I don't think we should be overly concerned about the rating agencies, because at least with S&P, I think we're in pretty good shape with them based on these objective criteria that they provided. That was my recollection, and maybe you recollect differently.
I do know that we tap on Moody's to rate us.
Yeah.
We have not tapped on S&P as long as I've been here. That would be a question for Andrew.
Sure. Am I right in thinking that we do have $250,000 in the model for 26 to be put in reserves?
So, right, the budget for the budgeted fund balance for the end of this year was like 4.4 million.
Okay.
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 So it was my,
Cool. Yeah.
thank you. I'm like, what's the word I want to use?
Yeah.
I'm
Aspiration.
passionate about
Yes.
it.
Yes. Your dream.
To add another 250. And so we could,
Sure.
because that was easy, it was something attainable.
Okay.
All right, without changing the fund balance policy, because once you change the number of the fund balance policy, you can't spend that.
Right. Right.
Okay.
So I think to circle back to your path, right? It's fine as is. If we can swing the addition this year, great, because then we can apply it to this policy. And so maybe like look at the reserve policy document in 26 with the dream of adding something to it this year, just in case. And if we aren't able to do that, we're still okay. And if we decide, yes, it's $250,000 on a $4 million thing we haven't touched in 2011. And that'll cover the reserve side until we can kind of get some more answers. And then is everybody kind of comfortable with that?
So
I'm kind of concerned that if we don't add some to the reserves this year, that
Yeah.
Moody will ding us.
I,
And
Yeah.
so
for sure.
I'm not comfortable staying at 4 million.
I think we're gonna end at 4.4.
Yeah, okay.
So that's good.
So that's good.
Plus your
That's-
250.
Well, no, that's
includes-
That's included.
for this
Yeah.
year.
So
I
I
agree
agree
with
with
the
projection
projection
Go through the budget is another and sort of work our way up.
Hopefully.
But yeah, I would agree, and I think if we can perhaps hold hands in this non-voting meeting and say, we agree, we want to continue to increase over time, and I think that there's an agreement on that. We can I debate the specific figures, but continuing to put away enough to fund what is needed in the future is beneficial. I'm sure Moody's too would also look favorably on our perhaps defined plan that over 5 years we intend to increase.
Well, they know that because we had that discussion last year with them and told them what the plan was. They also know that we were planning to spend down that huge fund balance that we had accumulated because of capital projects we were not able to complete. So they knew what the plan was, and then we met the plan at the end of 24, and there was no change.
Okay, so I think we have kind of a path,
Direction.
right, for a really fun April 2026 meeting to kind of maybe adjust the language on this if needed, talk to Andrew. Yeah, and then you wanted the second part.
Yeah, thank you. So the second part, and I think this ties into exactly what you were saying before. I do think it is, I will speak for myself. It is definitely my goal as well to be setting aside serious dollars into that fund. So, or into an appropriately named fund.
Right.
Will you please spend another minute, just the language in here? I frankly use some chat GPT to help simplify it for me. But I was trying to better understand why we would name it what it is. And can you give some thoughts on or direction on where we can start to really put dollars aside for Victory Lane?
Yeah, so I mean, I think any capital fund, so it can be in our regular capital fund unless the board wants to isolate the operational, what we know. I mean, I think of that 1/20th capital fund dollar figure we're putting aside specific to issues we know are going to be replaced is a deferred maintenance, very intelligent deferred maintenance approach, so that you don't have a lot of the things that we're struggling with right now, which is some very significant deferred maintenance in not just one site, multiple sites. And so the more we push that off down the road, the more that costs us. And then you're in a spot like we are now with, what could be a simple project at Centennial or cooling tower is a multi-million-dollar project. So I think that identifying which, maybe having that separate operational type plan is smart business because you're putting money where it should go and not putting things off so far that you spend more. And then that hurts the agency long term. And then specifically having, I love the language. I mean, it can be called something, it could just be in our capital that has money earmarked in a certain year that we're projecting for a specific project, or if the board wants to have a capital operational fund and a capital new capital or non-operational, or how we've termed that, or development or master plan, maybe master plan word. I know I'm throwing multiple ones out there. It's all saying the same thing, but accomplishing something where you do have these projects that you want to put in there that are not necessarily that operational repair type, but it's a new facility like we've talked about, or potentially new park. And then you specifically are putting money that is set aside and we can show that it's here for that.
So quick question on the first one, sort of the capital replacement, and I was trying to solve, how hard is that going to be for you to put that together? and give us a number of where we should have at this point and how much we should be adding on an annual basis. I think Commissioner Leahy and I were, over the course of the last year, have been going back and forth on kind of the capital plan and separate, well, we all have been having this conversation about how we separate sort of wants and needs and whatnot. I think this would be, at least for me, be incredibly helpful. But again, I'm a little bit nervous if we come back and say, oh, well, that means we need to have $42 million set aside. So, but I'd like to know the number. How hard is it to get the number?
Well, I mean, we have rough numbers, but it's not everything, right? We have,
No, of course it's not.
we have some of the stuff we all know about, but we don't have everything like sewers and water mains. And stuff like that that hasn't been accounted for in the past, that is, you know, at least.
Like water main at Centennial, for
Maybe
example,
there.
hypothetically speaking.
Just maybe there, maybe one of the many water mains in bad shape there, but there are, I mean, we could get something, it just wouldn't be super close. I mean, one thing I did is I did a study of every single facility and actually went a kind of a unique route and hired a general contractor to come in and look at all the buildings because they knew the true cost of things. And instead of an architect or a consultant like that. And it worked out really well. And I had a detailed third party look by a professional that's in the industry now, looking at every single facility. And that was really a great practice. That based a lot of my capital spending and planning off of that. For sure. That's an avenue, but I mean, I think for budget numbers, if Josh and I can put our heads together.
Is this a heavy lift for budget season then?
What's that?
Is this a heavy lift?
Well, going through the capital process that we're going through soon.
Yeah. Okay. Cash for this.
Will get us closer.
Yeah.
My thought on this is, we have our general capital fund. We have a fund for future projects, and we have a fund for replacement. However, they're titled. I'd like to see it that way, and the reason I'd like to see it that way is that it's rather transparent with what is the use of those dollars. To anybody that wants to look at how we are saving money.
Totally agree.
Yeah,
I think
I agree.
then it's a function of the details, which we can probably suss out over the next 4 months and have ordinances in December or January.
So to the ordinance statement, I'm wondering if we want to memorialize the additional funds in a very specific way, because there may be some years that we can't contribute to the future project fund, if that's what we call it, as much as we would like. And so I would, to your point about it being tied to a number, so I would rather say that we have this fund in a goal or something. I don't know legally how. Yeah, legally how.
That would be Andrew's question.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I do want to have it on the books.
Yeah.
And maybe year one, you don't, year one is next year, year one's this year, and it's this, then.
Right. Because I know that in the past, within the last 2 to 3 years, we had this conversation about increasing the capital reserve fund. And you wanted to do it $250,000 a year. And I want to say that was 2 or 3 years ago. And we just had a discussion about it. And everybody was in favor of getting it there. And we didn't quite make it each year. So I'm glad that you are pressing us to try and get that $250,000 in there this year. And so that's where I say to memorialize it in the way that we initially discussed it. So I would rather have it loose and make it somehow goals, but I don't know how to write that up.
And we'll see where we are in December with what we could do or can't do.
Yeah.
So another fun April meeting. But yeah, so is that helpful? Maybe this is something we want to have at some point in the next.
Are those 3 buckets, is everyone comfortable with?
Yeah.
That's been a great discussion.
Great. Any other comments or discussions? Chris, any other comments or
Oh, yes.
things needed? Okay. Moving along to 5.3, the budget guidelines.
All right, so we have, Also underneath this, we have the truth and taxation discussion, budget guidelines, really, we talked through at the, FinCal, and so as we're moving forward, staff was moving forward with the knowledge that we're going up 2% wage and 5% fees, general pool. Just wanted to, cement that moving forward as we're, jumping into our busy budget season, and we've made quite a few changes to try to soften the end of the year by pushing up some of the budgets and those discussions. So I just wanted to one last time say that sounds like what we're ready to do. And then and we added the truth and taxation discussion so that we can have a few different ideas of where to move forward on 5.3.1. So really that guidelines discussion was just ensuring that we're all ready to move forward, and sounds like we are.
So as we begin discussing the truth and taxation, this, the tax, I'm sorry, the tax levy conversation is where we are. Sheila, I'm lost for a second because last year, as I looked back, we were for special rec fund, we had this whole big discussion about knowledge changing, and we tried to make up a shortcoming all in 1 year, right? So I went back and 2023, where the special rec fund was $382,000 that we were taxing, and then in 24, the proposed levy was $657, and that was to get us back to, where we wanted the budget, or where we wanted the balance to be in that account.
Balance at 155,000.
So then I thought we would be falling back again in special rec levy, and all of these are maintaining it equal. And so correct me, why am I thinking we were going to fall back? So did I misremember?
So the expenses in the special rec fund, and you have that sheet there, have been somewhere between 600 to 700, 650, 640 is like the number that's sticking, okay? We had been not levying to that level,
Right.
okay? The expenses are going to be that high next year.
So there's,
So we would need to levy because the
Right.
fund balance has been replenished,
right.
but we need to levy to cover the expenses. The purpose for the three truth and taxation levy discussions would be to talk about the increase in capital spend. Okay?
So I want to take a step back about the special rec again. And it's not a huge number in our budget, but what you were saying is that we had to go to 657 last year in order to replenish that fund and maintain our expenditures,
Maintain the fund balance to cover the expenditures.
to cover the
Yes.
expenditures. And yet our expenditures are over 600 each year. So if we spent 657 this past year, how did we get the balance back up?
That increase, because the increase in the tax, and I think there was like 20 grand that was added to the balance for this year. So last year, we had planned to spend 100 in capital, and we spent 90. So there was an extra 20 grand there. And then we collected an extra $10,000 in back taxes. So we had an adjustment of 20,000 related to the fund balance at the end of last year that carried over to this year. To maintain the expenditure level, it's been about 650. So we just,
Including
increase.
capital.
Yeah, but remember, the increase in the levy went from a $300,000 number to a $600,000 number. That $600,000 number, we were able to replenish the balance and then cover the expenses for this year.
And the expenses go up.
I understand that, but
Mhm.
if we're spending 650 and the 650 was replenish the balance and cover the expenses, but we spent 650, how did we replenish the balance? Because the math isn't adding up in my head.
No, I think it's
I'm missing something.
No, I think-
That's why I'm asking the question.
I think it's a good question. Again, I had a similar expectation that you know, the increase in the fund balance wasn't going to be necessary this year, so that you should have seen a bit of a downward adjustment. But I think the schedule you've given us has explained it in the sense that, you know, for 25, the expenses are estimated at about 525,000, 527,000. We assume a 3% increase, that puts it at 540. Next year, you add 100,000 for capital. I know we're going to talk about maybe going to 150 or 2, and that's a separate discussion. But so, you know, if you had the 540 and the 100, that's 640, and right here, you're estimating it to be at 635. So the numbers do balance for this year. I still don't have a good answer to the question you're asking for the past, but I'm not sure we should spend a ton of time looking backwards. We should focus on the current.
In 24, you see the levy at 644. You see the expenses for this year at 525. So that's replenishing that balance right there.
Understood. That makes sense.
So it's on this sheet that was just handed to us. The net surplus in the fund at the end of this year for 25 is going to be $16,000.
It's going to be 150 something thousand. The net
Okay,
surplus.
so you're not showing that on this
No,
page,
I'm not
right?
showing
Okay.
you a fund reconciliation. I'm showing you how the property taxes are covering the expenses.
Yeah.
Knowing that we've got that fund balance replenished. Projection now is to add 16 grand to that 157, which means we'll be able to play with the property tax levy next year by the tune of about $16,000.
All right.
Maybe that wasn't the right, adjust the property tax.
Yeah, that was a little.
Let's go with that.
Yeah, that's what I still am trying to. I can follow up with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate the question, so continue to ask it. I find it very helpful.
Okay.
I agree. There seems to be that one line item that is missing, that when you say it, it makes sense, and because I'm not seeing it. Maybe you say it one more time for me.
The fund balance is
Yeah.
where I'm not seeing the fund balance. So
Right,
Yeah.
so the difference between the 644 that we're levying for 25 versus the 527 in expenses gives us the fund balance addition that we had to levy for to add to our fund balance for this particular fund. So $120-something thousand.
All right. So can you give us some background on this so that we may adjust the capital spending? I think everybody here supports the special rec fund. Everybody here wants to make sure that we meet the needs of the community. I think we're all very proud of the fact that I think the emphasis that we spend more money on NSSRA services than anybody else in the 13-member group or whatever. We certainly want to continue that. But are we falling behind on capital spending? Because I've always had that $100,000 number in my head. And that was based on an assessment that was done, 6 years ago, something like that. We've been whittling it away kind of year after year. Can somebody give us the context of why we're now contemplating 150 or 2? That can help.
Yeah. So, I mean, same line of thinking as 6-7 years ago, $100,000. Gosh, maybe a year ago, $100,000 might be 140 right now on this market in this climate. But not only, I know we all hear it, the cost is going up, but a lot of this is construction costs and material costs that have gone pretty crazy lately. Definitely can attest to that based off of the current market, where bidding and all that comes in. And also, there's some items that we have pushed off. And being caught up to speed on some of that. I can't tell you exactly what that is, but I do know that we have pushed some stuff off. And that we have a transition plan that this fund helps, us make progress in our ADA transition plan, which is a legal document. And that money is, I don't know how many items are on that spreadsheet.
6 for next.
No, in
fiscal year.
general, there's 1,000 probably.
Yeah, there's a long list.
It's
One time we
millions
looked
and
at it.
millions and millions of dollars. So,
Yeah.
in the way a transition plan works, there's no way we can be fully compliant in all of our parks and facilities. In even 5-10 years, it would bankrupt us, right? It bankrupt every public agency. So the intent is to do the greatest amount of good with the least amount of money possible. And so we have 6 items on for next year that we do really believe are needed, and prolonging them will just cost more in future years, and that they're needed now. And that gives us the ability to make a positive impact. And for a smaller increase. So I mean, ideally, we would want to go to 200,000. I mean, we could spend 10 million right now, but that's not
So
reasonable.
we can.
No, we can't. But the $200,000 number really helps, will really help kind of catch up to what we had put off and take advantage, take care of some of the things that we believe are needed now.
Some of those.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Can you share a couple of the projects?
I also just add in, I Googled, and it's 140,000, 6 years. So it's $120,000.
Josh, what are some of the projects that this one?
So at Lakeview Center, installing automatic ADA doors with locks on the first floor to access restrooms and classrooms. ADA accessible mats for the Cove entrance at South Beach and Langdon. ADA automatic doors for the North Early Childhood entrance to the playground. Resurfacing a path to the east side of the pickleball and sports shed to maintain ADA compliance. Automated ADA faucets district-wide, 60 of them. And then continuing with our ADA paper towel dispensers district-wide. So those would be the 6 items for next year that we've identified.
Excuse me. So my understanding is, I think I've heard it twice now then, that the third proposal is the one recommended by staff. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Should I say that correctly? Yes. So the 2 others were put out for what purpose?
It's really to show you the impact,
Okay.
on the levy and what that impact is. I mean, dollar figure wise, it's relatively small, in the grand scheme of our total levy. So it's really just looking at that special levy. But understanding that the dollars, I mean, we can move forward with $100,000. It just means we're not going to do things and we're going to put them off for another year. And someone's ability to wash their hands and dry their hands, they can't do it in all the centers. So just keeping those things in mind.
So, as I said earlier, I think all of us are in favor of making sure that everybody in our community has the services. I think we all like the idea of spending more capital on this. I do want to remind everybody, though, that we had a very, in terms of a percentage, a very large tax increase last year. I'm going to really struggle if our 2-year average is greater than 5%, or the part that we control, given it was 7.5% last year. I'm looking at the overall levy, not this. So from my perspective, if you want to go and spend 200,000 or 300,000 or whatever, that's great. But I want to see that money come out of the sort of the above the line. And I know that has some pretty negative impacts potentially on PTEL because you can't catch up in future years. But for me, for us to have a 7.5% increase last year and then it ends up being another 6%, I don't know what the number's going to end up being.
410.
No, but just whatever it ends up being, it's going to be problematic for me and maybe not for anybody else on the board. But if we want to sort of get up at those levels on this part of the equation, I would like to see compensating adjustments on the other side. So I would like you guys to factor that in as you're looking at these things.
Just want to point out, the Lakeview Center is barely ADA compliant, and it's not,
Good point.
so I guess, or perhaps what I'm thinking is, it's really not very, it's not very accessible as it is currently does, so adding some of those points without doing a larger project to address, because getting to that building to be able to use an ADA compliant door, I think, it's not a very convenient type of ramp and there are a lot of stairs there. So I'm just wondering if, and I guess that's the question of, whether spending that now versus doing a bigger project there to make that a better ADA compliant building.
So looking at the $200,000 of spend and really seeing what on there
Yeah,
we should,
I guess
we should
that's
potentially
really-
push off
right.
to make up the number a lower number in general.
That's kind of where I'm looking at, because I think more will need to be done to that building than just at the, at the doors.
I think that's an interesting approach. I mean, you're thinking about it from one angle of if it's $200,000, like we would with our capital budget, is that $200,000 a hard number that does not have wiggle room? Because that could help us meet in the middle a little bit as far as what percentage is then levied. So I mean, that's one project. Looking at the list, it sounds very comprehensive. I'm sure if Lakeview fell off, there would be very quickly something that would replace it on that schedule.
Yes, I have a couple thoughts. So first, we're gonna raise fees 5%. So I'm not intimidated by 4.1, 5% fee increase in the levy. Second, I don't approach it that way. We have our levy, which raises by CPI, which is 99% of the time what we should do. I can't think of any, I mean, I'm sure I could come up with 1% of the time. And then now how I look at special rec is we have our special rec expenses, which we have a statutory and moral obligation to meet, right? And then staff says $200,000 is what we need for ADA capital. And that reaches a number, and that's what it is. And our top line number that goes in the record, right, doesn't kind of matter because we're filling our special rec requirements. I understand your point, Cecilia, that $20,000 for entry in Lakeview might not really be the whole of it, but it's the law.
Well,
Right.
and per what Superintendent Walls was saying, there will always be another project to
Yes.
backfill. And I
Yes.
think that's something that we want to keep in mind in here, that number, if it's being recommended of the 10, what did you reference? The 10 million, right?
Oh, dollar figure 10 million.
I mean, all.
Spreadsheet, there's 5,000 right.
The $200,000 seems like a conservative number in the whole, Commissioner.
Can I just finish my one thought real quick?
Yes, please.
And then, so like the last part of it is, we can apply these pretty much anywhere. As you point, there's all these projects, right? That doesn't mean go crazy with the number. I think this is a prudent number and I trust staff. I think I hit all my points. I have one other great big idea that I don't remember. And now let's move on.
I'm sure it'll come.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure. Oh, I do have it.
Please.
I do have it because I brought out the sheet. We have the lowest percent of Wilmette tax bill since 1988.
That's absolutely true, and we have had the highest percent increase in our raises over what we as a park district have done for decades since Beach Health
And you
started.
could argue that we should have done that sooner. Okay.
Yeah.
I won't argue that.
And I won't either. Yeah.
Sorry, Julia.
Excessive tax increases, and we also need to do some work. So with respect to ADA, I still find it interesting that an act that was passed in 1990 isn't complete yet. And I know these things, 1,200 lines of them are important to do. It's interesting to me that Lakeview, which we've recently renovated, did not have the opportunity to put in those door openers. Seems like an oversight. Langdon just finished. The mat should have been purchased. We can wrap these into the projects. I mean, this is to
We
me,
use the special rec fund for it.
sure, but
That's the problem.
as we do projects, let's make a point to knock these things off.
It's a great.
I mean, 1990 was a long time ago, guys. Like, and I know we're not unusual. We are like a lot of districts, but these should be attacked meaningfully over time, maybe with another fund. Because we are finishing a project, we do it completely and make it ADA compliant. It just feels logical.
Great point.
That said, I am really mindful of the increasing, tax bill that all of our residents face. We want this to be the right thing. As I think about special rec, I know we are all really proud of NSSRA and our, our contributions. I think the other thing is people move here for schools, great public schools, and being a great public school district means we are very accommodating. We have, well-recognized program for, students up to 21. I think it's pretty special. So I'm very comfortable with going to 4.1. And I encourage others to as well.
So if I may, I'm going to come at this from a slightly different angle. You're saying that these improvements that you want to try and tackle for next year are going to cost us about $120,000 more than what we're already thinking about spending. Am I reading that right?
I mean, we haven't fully bid them, but our budget number, I think he said was like 190, right?
Yeah.
Is what we think the cost will be for those.
Yeah.
So we're spending about 640, 650 every year, plus another 100 and whatever you're saying. So my question is there, because you're estimating what these costs will be, and sometimes our estimates are too high. So I'm wondering if we can't challenge you and say, maybe I'm willing to, instead of saying going up by 120 over, I'd be willing to go 100 over. And that lowers our proposed tax levy by a little bit, and maybe gets it under 4, and challenge you to get this work done in $100,000 more rather than $120,000 more.
I think they always try and match.
I get it, but I throwing that out there. I said sharpen the pencil. So because you're estimating what this is going to cost, you don't know what it's going to cost, and so you're coming to us with an estimate, which may be low, maybe high, but I'm going to say, hey, can you get it done for 100 instead of 120?
I'm just
And then-
wondering, why can't we do in the course of a renovation, the extra 20 for the doors next time? Why does it have to be special
That's a
reg?
great point. I think we all agree.
We agree with you, but that project's done.
Sure, but
So when-
all the projects we're doing next year.
Let's make sure we harp on ADA.
Yeah.
I think though that goes back to your point, and it may challenge that point in that if we're trying to save dollars on here, but we're trying to take out, how are we accommodating the dollars that you want to save for? If how
Wait, are
are
we
we
talking-
accounting?
Are we
For all
talking
of
strictly
them.
about tax increases, or are we kind of back to the
I
capital
think we're
discussion
kind of,
earlier?
I think for you touched on both, so I think we're talking about both.
Okay, so, for me, and again, I think that in all the time I've been on the sport, I've always supported investing in our facilities, trying to provide new opportunities for the public, whatever. We're just in a bit of a weird spot right now in that, kind of coming out of COVID, we have seen our surpluses dropping over the last few years. It looks like the trend was reversed last year, and hopefully it's going to be reversed again this year. But we did, at least in terms of a percentage, we put a pretty big tax increase this past year. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we have asked a lot of our taxpayers, and so it'd be nice to sort of take a break, sort of like what the village did. The village a year ago, they actually decreased their levy because they knew that the next year they were coming up with a big police station project. And we're going to be going to the voters again sometime in the not too distant future, we all assume. So to have kind of 1 year at 7.5%, another year, whether it's 4.1 or 4.3, or once we get the Public Act 102 adjustment and all that kind of stuff. I don't know where those numbers are going to come. I'm just concerned about it. I think we're asking a lot. And back to your comment earlier, Commissioner Leahy, that our percentage keeps going down, but our percentage keeps going down because the voters approved all sorts of expenditures in the past for a lot of really great facilities. And as those facilities were paid off, that's why the number.
It's also because we're Pete's out and because the debt's rolling off. And look, we raised 6.1 last year. My neighbors, friends, colleagues, one comment about it. It was a 15-minute conversation about how we needed to maintain our special needs balance. I will have that conversation all day. I will bring up Commissioner Goebel's excellent point that what we probably should have done is use special rec dollars at Lakeview to complete these 5 years ago when we had them. And at the end of the day, in percentage terms, it appears like a lot, but in dollar terms, and given the subject matter, let's have that conversation. And it didn't happen last time, and I'm more than willing to have it.
Sounds good. Let's do that.
So I did a little math. if I can, if we reduced on, the page that says 4.1, so at the last page, which is the recommendation from staff, if we just get $20,000 out of that special rec fund, like I am asking, instead of going up by 120, but 100, then the total, proposed tax levy is, 3.84%. Now we're under 4. You can say we're producing it, and then when you average with last year, we get under 5% for the average of 2 years.
I mean, we just raised fees 5%. And if we're talking, well, I mean, I don't know why we're trying to split hairs on special needs. Like, we have never come to us and said, no one's ever said to us, I can't believe you didn't get under 4%. I'd rather listen to staff, trust staff, execute what we need to do, and what our obligations are.
And by the way, I'm not trying to split hairs on special needs at all. I'm just saying that if we decide we need to put those extra resources there, we should find a place someplace else to take.
Well, we could have this conversation all day with the idea of,
But just to clarify.
but just, and the idea for me personally of, like, I kind of hear, yeah, we need to fix the roof on the house, but let's take money from the garage, the shingles from the garage, right? Taking capital from our operating and putting in the special needs is just fungible money, when the alternative is to go to the community and say, we need this money. It's over 4-1, we're sorry, but we should have done it in the past and things are more expensive now. But like, that's where I sense, I think staff will look at those numbers and tighten them up. And you're right, there are elements to this that will still come out, and that number could be higher, and we will look at it again. But the whole point is to have that discussion. I don't want to speak for everybody. I have the sense that that last piece, while is unsettling, feels like consensus. And let's have the.
That's where I'm headed right now. Are there any other comments from Commissioner Vogel or Clark before? Do you have enough direction from us in the sharpening of the pencils with the 4.1?
Yeah.
Is that where?
That's where I am.
All right.
Great discussion.
Okay. Moving on to 5.4 Centennial flooring discussion.
This is exciting.
It is. This is very exciting. For maintenance.
So as part of the approved capital budget for this year, we identified funds to replace the lobby floor and ramp at Centennial. It's beyond its useful life. We sent out a public bid on August 20th with submissions due by September 3rd, 2025. Once we review and evaluate the bids, staff plans to make a recommendation for award at the September board meeting. The scope of work is to remove and dispose these existing floor, do some minor floor reparations, and put in some specialized flooring that is more conducive to a skate arena environment in high traffic areas like that.
I mean, this sounds really great. I'm bringing up the experience with the library. The library is removing old flooring or carpet in the basement, and there is asbestos in the mastic. So it has created a much, is there any chance that this, have you determined whether?
There's a high probability of that.
Yeah, so that will add to this cost.
The library, silly maybe when it comes to that.
Well, it's,
Glad you got
but
Yeah.
it's reality,
It
it
is.
has to be addressed, but so you,
70-something.
have you taken that into consideration?
Yeah, we did, and we have that
Yeah, it was mostly.
as part of this. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So yes,
And that's part of the bid process.
we have met with Ford, so this is actually very good. We had a mandatory bid meeting today. We had 4 vendors show up that all expressed interest on bidding on this project, so that's really good. 4 may not sound like a lot for this size and scope of the project. It's actually quite a bit, or quite a few vendors. We did go over the entire scope. Nothing was brought up with as far as asbestos and asbestos mastics. These are all professional companies and will follow the proper procedures.
Did we in the bid specify this brand of flooring? Or
Yes.
replacement or similar brand we use.
We specified it's exact same thing. This.
This is the one.
Yes.
Any discussion?
Any particular reason?
We identified that that would be best for this environment.
Longer life.
Yeah, it was looking really tired. These were there. That was the fun.
All right, 6.0 ongoing district projects.
So at Gilson Park Beach, I spoke with Gewalt Hamilton. They are going to work on the as-built and get that closeout start process going in September. The landscape contractor is going to be on site in the next couple of weeks to finalize all of that, so we can start wrapping up that project. At Langdon, staff did install a fence over the weekend, so that sail fence is up. The contractor has two minor small punch list items to do on the guard hut, and we'll be wrapping that project up shortly. The CRC solar panels, I'm happy to say I got an email right before the meeting. We did, I've been putting some pressure on ComEd. We got a date. They were a little bit delayed with the storm cleanup, so we thought we were going to get pushed off later, but we have a September 6th date that we just received to do the proper shut over or cut over.
And can you just explain for the benefit of everyone, what does that mean? Because our community has seen this go in, but what does it mean when like the flip is switched?
So ComEd will come out and we need to change out some electrical change gear. They will come shut down the power at CRC Rec Center over the weekend. There will be some impact to the building operationally. And once that's complete, the vendor can continue on and we will finish the solar project shortly. The CRC reconstruction, as I had previously said, we got one quote. That quote had been submitted to LJ Shaw. We are currently still waiting on another quote. The vendor has all their pricing. They're just waiting on their material pricing to send us the finalized quote. So we should get that shortly, and then we'll have the two quotes to compare, and then submit that to the insurer, and then we can hopefully get that project started soon and get that reconstruction underway. Hibbert Park, they've making some great progress at Hibbert Park. The pickleball courts have cured. Those should be lined and striped later this week. The sidewalks have been installed. The shade structure is up. We have most of the sidewalks, most of that's installed. They're finishing that up. As soon as that is complete, they will then transition to the south baseball field. Simultaneously, they're working at the ECC playground that's been demoed. They're starting to work on there. We have that, and it's accessible for the children to get over to the playground. So we have that space available. Staff actually was on site today. We took away one of the parking spaces to give some more walking space with the fencing and everything. So that project is progressing great, and that should be done. The playground portion should be done in another 4.5 weeks or so.
Well loved. I know the preschoolers started up today and the shade structure was already a hit.
I guess one of the emails in our packet was regarding the fencing at Dog Beach. And has there been any, if they were saying that you're working on getting.
So Anna, who we brought on as our parks planner, has been working on that. She has worked with a contractor that came out to design or to work with the layout of the fence. She's working on drawing the fence, and we've gotten pricing for that to budget for next fiscal year, that project.
And with Gilson and Langdon, do we know when we'll have be able to put a bow on these things and compare actual costs to budgets, go back? We've talked about doing that this time, and do we think we'll be able to go back? Do we think we'll actually be able to go back and do that for Lakeview as well?
Right.
Because
Well,
it'd be nice to have those numbers.
it would be. Lakeview would definitely be great if we could have those numbers, and same thing with Gilson and Langdon.
We're working on closing those projects out.
Yeah, just wondering some rough idea of timing.
Probably 6 weeks.
I was going to say October, 6 to 8 weeks-ish.
Yeah.
If it's at the end of the budget season, even to January, it's fine. I would love to see those
Yeah.
numbers.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of other stuff going on. I understand that, but by the beginning of the year, it'd be great to
Yeah.
look at those and talk about those.
Sooner is better for staff as well.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Sounds good.
We're pushing hard to get those to the finish line.
Thank you.
Great. 7.0.
Yeah, I move to adjourn to closed session for the discussion of the purchase or lease of real property for the use of the Park District, including meetings held for the purpose of discussing whether a particular parcel should be acquired, as well as the setting of a price for sale or lease of property owned by a public body in accordance with sections 2C5 and 2C6 of the open meeting.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.